bring a goat. So let's say I'm on the outside of the outer court, and you have that picture. That's what this is. This is considered the outer court. Now, I have to say, I've stopped here for a minute. I noticed that I was going to tell them that if you go into any traditional church, for the most part, it's still laid out the way the tabernacle was. Because there's usually, especially if you go to like an older church, they'll be way in the back where the communion is done. There's one place with a division, Holy of Holies. And you come here, and this is the holy place. And guess where you guys are? You're in the outer court. And if you're standing on the outside of the window looking in, then you're one of the guys in the tents. But you look at the structure of any church, and that's the way it is. Solomon's temple was, but even your modern churches, even the more modern ones. However, this gentleman here has completely blown that out. All his pews are going this way, and the old Holy of Holies is up there. But it's interesting that we still that pattern is still in place, even in our churches and the synagogues as well. So what would happen is you would have several priests here. There was one high priest, which was Aaron, the first high priest, and he was, and the tribe of Levi, or the Levites, were the ones who were designated to be priests. That didn't mean every single Levi became a priest, but different ones were chosen, and they were born into the priesthood, and then chosen depending on who they were. So Aaron started that. He was the first one that was the high priest, but there were other priests there. So let's say I'm out here, and I'm coming in, and I'm bringing an offering. Now, if I'm poor, the poorest offering you could bring was 2 pigeons. Who brought 2 pigeons when they dedicated their son at the temple? Mary and Joseph. That's right, because they were poor, and that's here. So you might bring 2 pigeons, or you might bring a goat, or you might bring a lamb, but it had to be a perfect one, or at least the best of your flock. And there were 2 things that went on, depending on what kind of an offering it was. There were many different offerings, and we have not got time to go. If you want to read all the offerings, go to Leviticus, and they'll tell you everyone from a grain offering to a full bull or something that they would bring in. So if they brought the animal in, they were allowed to come into here where the priest was. They were allowed to come in from there, bring the animal in, and the priest would put his hand on the head of the animal. And he would speak over it, and the people that came in, so you had 2 situations. You would either speak over a goat, for instance, and once a year they had one where they spoke at Yom Kippur. They would speak all the sins over that goat, and then they would send it out into the desert, which is where we get the expression scapegoat. So all the sins went out into the desert. That was the idea, and everybody. Now today the Jews fast on Yom Kippur. They're not bringing goats to the temple anymore. So, but you would take, and the priest would put his hand over, and that's where we get the concept of blessing and cursing. If I pray for people, generally I put my hand on their head or on their chest, and they would speak that. The person would make his confession, then they would slit the animal's throat and kill him. And then when he died, they would, it had all kinds of things they did with the insides and where they had to be and all that, and they would lay it there and burn it. So it sounds ghastly and gruesome, doesn't it? So we're thinking to ourselves, well, why did they have to do that? Why was all their blood? You know what? You repeat that over and over and over and over and over again on a constant basis. And then one day, and you're told to do that, and one day John the Baptist is in the Jordan River, and he goes, behold, the Lamb of God, without spot or blemish. All of a sudden, that hits a community that's been doing it for years after years after years in that repetition. They go, well, wait a minute, that must be the Messiah. He's come to sacrifice himself for the world. So this ceremony was all they had. So it was like a propitiation for their sins. And they would go back outside, but that's as far as they were allowed to go. Then the priest, if he was going to enter here, or there was a priest who was allowed to enter in the holy place to keep up the things, he would come to this. Now this particular piece was made out of bronze, and this is made out of bronze. Everything in the outer court was made out of bronze. This had very specific measurements. It was 7 feet by 7 feet by 4 feet, and it had a grate in it. No measurements are mentioned. We know it's bronze, but interestingly, in those days they didn't have mirrors, which as a woman I think would be wonderful. And to ever have to see what happened there. But they would take pieces of their bronze and polish it up. And that's what they would do. They'd look at the reflection. So it would be more like what we think of as brass. And this thing was highly polished, and there was water in it, and the priest would have to wash himself, the ceremonial cleansing, before he went into the holy place and went through those curtains to go in there. So when we think of this fulfilling, of this being a fulfillment of Christ, this represents the crucifixion. It represents his sacrifice for us. And also brings back the idea of the Passover lamb. And then when we think about this and we come to wash, it's reminiscent of baptism, is it not? Because remember, John came baptizing, and John was a Jew. He wasn't a Baptist. Well, he was the first Baptist, but anyway. So, but the whole idea of ceremonial washing, they would come and wash, but also when you look into something like that, it causes you to reflect. So if this is the Christ who was perfect, and we reflect in there, and we see ourselves, it gives us time to say, Lord, show me what it is I need to do. I've come to this door, I recognize my own nature, and I accept what you've done for me, and now I want to reflect. We live in a society that's totally reactive. Everything's boom, something happens, boom, I do that. Okay, you said that, I'm going to say this. You did this to me, I'm going to do that to you. You did this, I did that. So I think, okay, my sister over here offends me. So I've got a choice. I can take time to reflect and say, Lord, what is the best possible thing I can say back to her that will be healing, that will speak life to her, and that will reunite us? And you know what? Even if it doesn't, I want to give her something good. I don't want to react to her and hurt her. We don't do that, though. Somebody offends us. You know, somebody once said the greatest state to be as a Christian or as anyone is someone that gets to a point in their lives where the only thing that offends them anymore is something that offends the Lord. So you can't offend me because, you know, I am. There are many things that might make me sad, but I'm no longer offended for myself. I would rather be offended that this lady here was hurt than I would be just for myself, because I know who it is who's holding my hands, who's holding me in his hands. So this is what's cause for reflection. It shows the image of Christ, but also the idea of that cleansing that takes place once we receive that. Now, when the priest came in here, this part here, we'll take away the linen. You come into this part. This is called the holy place. It was 15 feet high, 30 feet long, and 15 feet, so it was 15 feet wide, 15 feet high, and 30 feet across. And these were, I'll show this so that you can see it. These pieces here, when they came in through this curtain, there were priests, not Aaron, who was the high priest, who was the only one allowed in the Holy of Holies, but these priests came in on a regular basis. They came in, there were several hours of prayer during the day. The Jews today consider the hours of prayer to start at whenever sunrise is. So if it starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, then every 3 hours somebody comes in to pray. And that was the case then. And also, they would come in and they had certain duties. So one of the things, now the lampstand, these pieces in here are not bronze. These are gold. So